Dregs, happy Monday, my man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Good morning, fellas.
We've got lots to get to. The Edmonton Oilers, we were talking about in the first hour of the show today. The game they played against the Rangers on Saturday was the first time all season we watched that team and thought, oh, okay, like maybe this team is a true Stanley Cup contender. I know it's a quarter of the way into the season for them to finally have that game, but an encouraging sign nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, you have to pick your spots when you're dispensing criticism. So when you have a game like that, I think you also have to appreciate that this is the same group to a point. We're going to be talking for a long time unless management does something about that defense, because it does seem like that's the deepest and darkest area of concern from a defensive and from an offensive perspective. I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's basic hockey. If you don't get the puck out of your own end, or you can't transport the puck into the hands of McDavid and Draisaitl and go down the list of all the offensive weapons they have, that's going to be a problem. And it has been. It's what's, I think, put this team in a place of wild inconsistency. Now, if they go on a run here, and that's a good Rangers team that they beat, to your point, Dusty, then maybe they can develop some confidence from the crease out that puts a Band-Aid and buys management a little bit more time to just fully assess what's available in the market. But, as we're reminded of every single year, I think it was around November 30th, wasn't it, last year when the Vancouver Canucks acquired Nikita Zadorov? There are teams that can jump into the pool and get decent pieces early. So let's see if Edmonton fits into that category. There's no panic in Edmonton, nor should there be. But there is concern when it comes to the consistency of this team. And I paused a little bit because I wanted to use the dysfunction word. Mm-hmm. And I think to a point that applies as well when you look at their overall game and the lack of consistency.
Darren, just taking a look at the opposition Saturday, too, I think, some people saying a potential Stanley Cup matchup, you offer Oilers fans that, they'll rip your arm off here, but not a good trip through the province for the Rangers. They fell to the Flames a couple nights prior, 7-3 away from MSG, those two losses, again, coming in the past couple days. So what type of Rangers team did we see? Albeit pretty healthy. I mean, struggling on pretty good in the Met. But was it so much, do you see from Saturday night, the Oilers really pouring it on, bringing their A game, or the Rangers maybe falling off a bit in those past two here in the province?
Yeah, a little bit of both, and it doesn't speak to the parity that exists across the National Hockey League. And on any given night, you're going to have teams that maybe surpass expectation, or in this case with Edmonton, kind of found a way to self correct. And, you're right. The New York Rangers are a top team in the Eastern Conference. I thought they'd be a little bit better, but there's still a ton of hockey left. And when I look around that Eastern Conference, again, you see signs of struggle. The Florida Panthers ripped off like 7 straight wins, and now they're 1-5 in their last 6. Well, we know by virtue of the Stanley Cup championship that the Florida Panthers, again, are going to be a top-notch team in the Eastern Conference. But right there is the New York Rangers, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the New Jersey Devils are proving that they've rebounded. So, Eric, I think it was a combination of things here. I think it is, let's give credit where credit is due. The Oilers were getting kicked in the shins, and we in the media were talking about what they need and what they're not doing and how this player is unhappy and that player is unhappy. And then you look at the New York Rangers, and there's lots of kind of speculation percolating around what Chris Drury, the general manager of the New York Rangers, might be interested in doing. So that normally kind of surfaces when you get to just past the 20-game marker U.S. Thanksgiving.
Prior to the win over the Rangers, the Oilers lost to the Minnesota Wild in a game where the final score was kind of misleading. Like, the Minnesota Wild were outstanding. They only have 3 regulation losses all
really
season.
Good. Yeah.
Dregs, I'm not sure that's sustainable, but are the Minnesota Wild legitimate contenders here as we creep towards American Thanksgiving?
Well, I think we have to at least put them in that area of conversation. And you guys watch the Wild enough in the West where, Kaprizov, thank heavens, it doesn't sound, according to the reporting of Mike Riesel and others there, that he's going to be sidelined for too long. But, he's right there among the superstars and probably doesn't get enough credit for how good a player he is, just how explosive he can be. But, he's not alone. They've got a lot of good things going in Minnesota. Their defense is sound. Their goaltending is good. And I admire the approach of Billy Guerin, the general manager there. Not afraid to make the real tough calls. And that goes via trade. I mean, he's one of the more active guys. If he's got to make a tough decision with the coach, he's proven historically that he's capable of doing that. And we've talked about this before, but how difficult a conversation you think it was for Billy Guerin to go to his owner, Greg Leopold, and say, oh, by the way, I think it's a good idea that we buy out Parise and Ryan Suter, and you're going to have to eat tens of millions of dollars to do it. But in the long run, it's going to be great for the Minnesota Wild. And they're now coming out of that financial funk, right? So to see what's going on with Minnesota now, that speaks to good management. It speaks to terrific coaching. It speaks to just the buy-in from the players because they've got a little bit of everything. Yeah, they've got the superstar status there. They've got the buy-in. They've got character guys. They've got a little bit of everything. So if they're not a top contending team now, Dusty, they're not that far away, man. When they've got that cap space that they can utilize when they come out of the buyout darkness, then they're going to be a top-level team, not just in the West, but I think across the league.
Darren Dreger with us on the show this morning, brought to you by Pro-Am Sports. I want to get to St. Louis, Boston. I want to get to Joe Thornton as well, but just one more on the Edmonton Oilers. Kapanen's come in, played a couple of games. Looks so like for a waiver claim, he looks all right. But he started in Toronto. What's the book on this guy, and what should Oilers fans expect moving forward?
Yeah, I mean it's tough to even create the book on Kasperi Kapanen. Let's accentuate the positive, right? The reason that Edmonton would have claimed him is because he's got quick feet. I mean, he's a flat-out fast player, and that's what Edmonton needed. So any injection of speed is going to be welcome to that forward core. I guess the big question is though, why hasn't he stuck anywhere? Toronto gave him a look, then he moves on, and then he ends up getting claimed off waivers. So there's got to be a lot more going on there than what we see at the surface. I'll use the C word again, that's consistency. And it feels like he's just never been able to develop his game to be trusted enough on a consistent basis, on a shift-by-shift basis. So he's running out of runway here. His opportunities are going to become fewer and fewer. I mean, when you get claimed off waivers, that's a pretty clear indication that, okay, you're a project piece now. Yeah. So you better figure it out, and you better take advantage of your opportunity, or the next stop is going to be out of the National Hockey League. And that's probably where he's headed if he doesn't seize this chance. So, he'll get a real good look, but again, the negative side of it is just inconsistency, and it feels like that's a word that we're using a lot around this Oilers team.
Darren Dreger with us on the show this morning. Dregs, the Bruins have fired 3 consecutive Jack Adams winners who've all been scooped up within 8 days of being fired. The most recent one is Jim Montgomery. Interesting decision for St. Louis to make with Bannister so fresh into his tenure as head coach. But when you see somebody that you think is one of the best coaches in the National Hockey League, I give a team credit for pulling the trigger on something like this.
You know what? It's as cutthroat as it gets. It really, truly is. But Doug Armstrong is looking at his St. Louis Blues team, and he's like, all right, we're 22 games into this regular season. We're 5 points out of a wild card spot. It's likely not going to get any prettier. So what can we do to try and just push things along here a little bit? And if they don't go according to plan, which of course for every team is to be in that playoff conversation, then you've got a very experienced, successful coach that you can lean on through the tough times and the better times down the road. It's a crappy business if you're Drew Bannister. What is he, 22 games in? He's not an interim coach here. He was a full-time NHL head coach, a coach that came in with some promise, a very good American Hockey League coach. But the tough side of it is, no one expected that Jim Montgomery was going to be available at the start of the season, right? Nobody thought that the Boston Bruins were going to go through what they continue to go through. Yeah, there's a coach bump with Joe Saku now. the interim coach of Boston. It seems like, they're responding in a good fashion. But I think that this was also recognition by Doug Armstrong in St. Louis, guys, of some of the other teams that were struggling. Hey, what do we think is going to happen with the Detroit Red Wings here if they don't come out of their mess? They're on a homestand. It doesn't look like it's getting better. I got to believe that some of the general managers who are in need of something positive were sniffing around Jim Montgomery. And why did Jim Montgomery not embrace the contract extensions that his former general manager, Don Sweeney, acknowledged at the going away press conference? I mean, I don't recall the last time I heard a general manager sit there after firing his coach and saying, well, multiple times we tried to engage in extension conversation and he just wouldn't have it. Okay, I mean, did Monty know that his stock was that high that he would get picked off the scrap heap that quickly? Maybe. Yeah. I mean, there are some who think that was the case. So if you're St. Louis, do you let it twist? And do you let Steve Yzerman step in and grab him? Or do you make the tough call that ultimately he made, knowing a guy that you trust, the experience, the history you have with Jim Montgomery? And that's what they did. So, yeah, I mean, I appreciate why they did it, but I can also look at it through the lens of Drew Bannister, and it's a tough business.
Darren, I just also wanted your thoughts. We mentioned the Bruins here. They're even on points with the Buffalo Sabres, one of the hottest teams around the league right now. Winners of 3 straight, 7-3 in their past 10. Is more of a blip, or are things finally turning around in Buffalo?
We're waiting forever for the Sabres to get going.
I want to believe, you know?
Yeah, I'm with you, but I still think it's a blip.
Yeah.
And it's not like I don't think that this team is capable. Kevin Adams has repeatedly shared with me that he likes his team, that this team is better than its record indicates. Again, we've just talked about some of the tough decisions that the GM has to make, and Adams has done that time and time again. So maybe there's some payback that's coming with this 3 straight wins, but it doesn't quite feel like they're over the hump. I hope they are, because I'd like Buffalo to be a better story. They've endured enough pain and suffering in that city, around that organization. But I feel like we don't need a 10-game winning streak, but I feel like we need a segment of 10, 15 games where they're playing at least well above 500, where you go, okay, I'm starting to see it, and we're not there yet.
Dregs, quickly, before we let you go, Joe Thornton was honored in San Jose over the weekend. He just had a fabulous speech. I had a chance to have a really good chat with him at the Spengler Cup last year. Seems so genuine.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a great moment. I mean, what can you say about this guy?
Yeah, man. I don't know. Did you guys catch the sit-down interview that he did with Jason Demers? It was just tremendous. And for all those that are watching or listening, go and find it. It'll be easy to find. But you really get a dose of Joe Thornton, a human being. We recognize him clearly from just the hulking presence and the career that he had. But it was so much more than that. The man, you can't play the game at the highest level and not love the game. But Joe loved everything about it. He played games wrapped in braces and bandages and everything just because he just loved being around the boys, as he liked to call them. So every moment he lived in it as an NHL player. And yeah, the speech was terrific. That's vintage Jumbo, I think, is the best way to describe it. And I'm mostly intrigued now as to what's next for Thornton. And there's a place for him as he occupies with the San Jose Sharks. But does he have any sort of ambition to, do what he's doing internationally in management and translate that into what he might do in the future in the National Hockey League? And we're not going to know that until maybe his kids are a little bit older. They're not babies anymore, as we clearly could see from the party that they had in San Jose. But does he have the fire burning in his belly as he did as a player to transport that into coaching or management? That's what I'm intrigued by.
Dregs, great chat, man. When's the next episode of Ray and Dregs Drop?
Yeah, today, as a matter of fact. And Ray is fired up. There's been a lot of hockey news, as we've already discussed here, and more to come. So going to be a juicy headlines with plenty of opinion on Ray and Dregs later today.
Excellent, man. We'll chat next week.
Okay, guys, have a good one.
There you go. That's Darren Dreger.